Does anybody have a flask asking for a friend?
He's the friend.
No judgment. Whiskey? Vodka? Tequila? Ben, if you have beer and a flask, I need your man card. Like. Okay. Okay, you're on probation.
Super secret. All right, let's go ahead and kick it off. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so next speaker up here is a self-proclaimed skilled communicator.
Ooh. That's exciting. Who wrote that?
Come on, Ben. Chill out. He's got a talk here on hacking your life. Hudson Harris.
That's good.
Here you go.
That was the best. Oh.
Are we going to use that one or not?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's the future's a broad horizon. That was a great introduction. Thank you. I was just saying that I always find at these conferences people talk a lot about themselves, and I find that nobody really cares. If I was supposed to convince you to be here, it's either too late or we already did it. So, my name is Hudson Harris, and I'm going to talk to you today about human-centered design and hacking your life. When I originally talked to Dave and Dan Yarger about this talk, there was kind of two different tracks. One would be useful professionally. One would be useful personally. So instead of picking, I decided to do both. So we're going to kind of have both kind of blend in and out. And I have a question. Who here has heard of human-centered design? A few hands. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. Oh, good. We got a good room. Human-centered design is something that is starting to gain a whole lot more steam. If I had to compare it to something, I think Black Belt, Six Sigma, stuff like that back in the day is going to be somewhat similar to the human-centered design stuff in the next 4 or 5 years. A lot of the human-centered design aspect just comes from a design process. So how are you building solutions for people? How are you building solutions for problems? And then a process around what to really pull out of that to give yourself the biggest chances of success. Some of the really, really big human-centered design projects that we'll talk about have had some really neat breakthroughs and kind of really neat ways of cross-platforming and moving things around. Where we're going to start is right in the meat of it. So this at a very high level is the human-centered design cycle. Where you would use this, if you were designing software, if you're designing an actual product, if you were designing even things like offices, it's been used across the planet in a whole bunch of different ways. But the whole system is really built on these 4 steps: define, ideate, prototype, and iterate. And I always have to turn around and look at those because I stumble and trip and can't remember which one it is. But the whole idea here is that you don't just do in a direction. You don't just code in a direction. You don't just develop a product in a direction. Is everybody familiar with that phrase, like do something in a direction, like work hard, not smart, like that kind of thing? So we're just going to start coding instead of designing, mapping, building. And what you'll find is that as we go through this process, these things become really self-evident. And it's really something to take at a really, really basic level to what you do every single day. So if somebody says, here's a project, I always start with framing the problem. I always go to say, what am I trying to do here? What am I actually trying to accomplish here? So what's an example of this? I was asked to come in on a big data project to create an open data standard for mental health. To create a standard just like we have with HL7, just like we have with the Ethernet cables, the ISO standards, all those things. Most things in this country have some type of standard of how they translate and communicate. Open data standards for mental health do not. So I was brought into this project. I got very, very excited, and I lost complete sight of the problem that we were trying to address. I built out entire pathways, I built out networks, like I had all this stuff mapped out and things and definitions and stuff, but I didn't actually get down to the key issue, which was what was the problem we were trying to solve. So what we do in this step is, and I'm a big fan of visuals, so I have actual examples of things I've worked on. So as we define the problem here, what you'll see is that at a really high level, you sit down with your entire team, and color code your Post-it notes. You're going to need a lot of them. But we color code Post-it notes, and sometimes the color coding, I think on this one, these were different people, had different colors so that you could match and track as it goes through. But what we did is we really nailed down what are the exact problems we're trying to go after. So that's right down here under key questions. So as you go through this process, keep some things in mind. Constraint is really, really important. There have been a whole lot of studies and research recently that has validated the hypothesis that when you have environments with unlimited resources, the Googles, the Facebooks, all those things, you don't innovate the way that scrappy startups do. So now there's entire treatises on how to basically build these scrappy little labs, if you will. But some really easy way to put constraints. Time. So you don't want to have unlimited time. You don't want to have unlimited resources. And a lot of times you don't even want to have unlimited features. So really you want to define your problem, set some constraints, and then start identifying all of your, I go with 6, your top 6 key questions. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's a little more. 6 always seems to just about hit the number. But set the limits. Materials, time, people, resources, all of these things create an environment where it forces our brains to do the thing that we need to do, which is make the leap. To bridge the two places that our brain has been and what we know and get to where we want to go and what we want to do. So one of the things that I always do in this situation when I'm trying to think big and ask these questions and get these activities and tools together is really keep that in mind. How am I bridging what I'm doing and taking it elsewhere? So once you've identified all of your key questions, get to consensus. So this is not a convergence. You're not trying to boil them down. You're just trying to make sure that you've got them lined up. So if these are all questions about one issue, match them up. And then what you want to do is come up here and activities, tools, and techniques. So the activities, tools, and techniques are all the things that a lot of you are already doing when you're designing malware or pen testing things or other things that make Ben shake his head that I don't understand about hacking and things. But like all the tools and things you use, list those. Like literally, here's all the things we're going to use. Here's all the equipment we're going to use. Here's everything that we're going to have. And there's a reason for this. When you start to identify the environment, your brain starts to do magical things where it starts to make a bubble. These are the things I have, these are the things I don't have, this is what I have to accomplish. And you create an environment that is literally spurring innovation and new neuron connections in your brain. This is literally, I'm using that word literally not by the definition of the dictionary, which is figuratively, but they're actually mapped out neuron connections when this stuff happens. It's pretty amazing. So, activities, tools, and techniques. Some of the other ones that I really like is identifying really, really big, high-level things that you want to do. So, system mapping. Whenever I work with my clients. I work a lot in mental health, technology, product design, go-to-market stuff, kind of in that area. Whenever we do that, I always start with the system map. Whether it's a product, whether it's a service, whether it's just something we want to launch, I create a system map. And a system map is really just how's it going to be used, who's going to use it, where's it going to go, what's going to happen, and what do we want to have happen throughout that whole cycle. Because then what you're doing there is establishing the whole life cycle of what you're trying to build. So then you build in these steps, and what you'll find is you do things like system mapping, it will actually create new little bubbles in your brain around these types of things have these issues and these problems. So this is defining the problem. The next step is ideate. Ideate is my most favorite, next to prototyping, my most favorite phase. But brainstorming is something we've all heard of and is really boring. Like super boring. Nobody really actually, yes, everybody knows what brainstorming is, but nobody really wants to do it. It's just a buzzword. So this is what I encourage you to do when you get to the brainstorming phase. Get ridiculous. Get extreme. Go all the way to the opposite ends of what you're trying to do to figure out what you need and what's happening. So case in point. IDEO is a humongous human-centered design consulting firm, and they were brought in to make a new kitchen gadget. And I would bet that by the time I get to the end of this story, most of you have used this kitchen gadget and don't know how it was made. So this kitchen gadget was supposed to dry vegetables. And they had all sorts of prototypes, all sorts of different things about how we're going to design vegetables. And so the way they got extreme is they said, okay, what's everybody who could possibly use this? On one end, professional Michelin star chef. On the other end, a child, 4 or 5 years old. And in the middle, line cook at a restaurant or, at a place like this. So the full spectrum, because the product was really meant just for the middle. But what they found is that by going all the way out to the extremes, it opened up a whole new level of design possibility for them. The other thing to keep in mind when we are in the ideate stage is be divergent. Has anybody ever done divergent brainstorming or divergent ideation? Does that ring a bell at all? Okay, so who's been in a room where there's a lot of ideas and one person goes, you know what, that idea is the one? Has anybody ever, is that fun? Do we like that? No, nobody's ever been in that room. Wake up, woo, wake up. Has anybody ever been in a room where somebody shut down the entire discussion? There we go. That's convergent. Yeah, this one does it all the time, so does Val. Val is our social hacktress. If you've not ever seen her speak, she's very divergent when it comes to how to hack people's lives and nuclear facilities and banks. Here's the idea behind divergent. I want you to think of things like a little branch, like a little tree. You have a single nugget of an idea, and instead of consolidating and refining, it's not what you're supposed to do here. You're time limited, half an hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever you want to put it on. Find that nugget and grow it, and get weird and get different and get out there. You want to grow this side of the funnel. The whole idea is that you have a list of ideas that quite literally look like the top of a tree, all the branches. So you're going to get on the extremes, and you're going to be divergent in your thinking, which is very different than what we do today. Most places do today. So yes, that was the other thing. So one of the other things that I like to do is what's called a mashup, and other shoes storm. So the mashup idea is where you take questions, problems, and ideas that have already happened, and you put them together. Figure out, how do we take these things that we know might be valuable or good and mash them up? The other ideas storm is the empathize portion of this. The empathize aspect of this is probably one of the most critical and one of the ones that a lot of people, I think, just kind of gloss over. But the way that empathizing works in this situation is you pretend, literally, that you're trying to be the person who's going to use it. That you're trying to figure out exactly what you're going to do. So like when they redesigned airplanes, they did a terrible job. But the firm that was built in to redesign the airplane seating for Boeing literally brought in chairs and limited their space, and they lined up the chairs in 100 different possible configurations. They built bunk beds, they did standing, they did all this stuff. Some of my other favorite ones are, there was one where they were trying to figure out a solution for arthritis, and what they did is they got those big elastic bands at the gym and they tied them around all of their joints and taped them so that they couldn't move, and it made it hard. Some of the ways for mobility, sitting in a wheelchair as opposed to being able to walk around to understand what it's like to order a cup of coffee at a coffee shop if you can't stand up. That's empathizing. So whether it's you're using something digitally, you're using something in the real world, but experience, physical, and digital, the three aspects of empathizing with an individual. And what you'll find is that by figuring out where to empathize, you get a whole lot closer to solving the problems you've identified. So this is part of what ideating looks like as we get there. So up on the top, we still have all of the different activities, tools, and techniques, but now what we've done is we put some different ideas in there around models, wireframes, task flows, mock-ups, workflows, everything that we wanted to have as a part of it. And now you see that the questions have refined much down. So we've taken those questions, we've ideated different solutions, and by ideating the solutions, it's refined our questions. Because it's this whole CQI, continuous quality improvement loop. Every time you're going to one question, you're going back and forward this whole time. This seems complex, it gets really simple and really fast. All right, here we go. So, prototype. Prototype is really, really fun. Has anybody ever done live prototyping for product design or live prototyping for system design or anything? It's a lot of fun. Like, and here's the whole thing about prototyping I want to keep in mind. This is quantity, not quality. These are very rough, and you want to keep it fun and silly. Why do we want to keep it fun and silly, Hudson? That's ridiculous. We're professionals most of the time. Your brain works a lot better when it's laughing. Your brain works a whole lot better when you can get a friend to pose and do something like this. I gave a challenge to make a hat out of foil and make that hat something that had never been done before. So my friend Nicole built a hat out of foil, cut some goggles, and it was I can't remember what it was for. She was to mow the lawn so that her eyes wouldn't get hurt. She had to build this, but really fast, really simple. And I built one too that was way worse that I'm not going to show because no pictures survived. But prototype it out. And sometimes it's as simple as doing, on a programming side, doing a clickable PDF. You can go and do some wireframes to understand how things will go and flow. But it's really, really critical at this stage to not get perfectionist, but keep it really basic and low to the ground. I've seen prototypes as basic as a flip book. I've seen them as complex as like almost demos where they had a sandbox where they could build stuff live. Some places now, like some of the really big healthcare companies that are doing a lot of this stuff, have actual garages in their offices where people can go and innovate product design for medical devices to help people on the floor. They've got wood shop tools and metal shop tools and all this kind of stuff. This is what's coming. Like, this is how this stuff is going to go. So think about, how do you prototype what you're trying to build? And I think that this is a step that a lot of things miss. I can't tell you the number of times I've even said, okay, so here's your budget and here's your project. Okay, go forth, give us a plan. Okay, now deliver it. It's a really, really, really bad way to develop something, because you're always going to get something that you've either already done or is just a little bit different than what you've done. Prototyping forces you to get out of that. It forces you to say, where are my extremes? What's happening? What am I doing? So this is what's fun about prototyping. The prototyping of the kitchen tool before, what they found is that you needed to dry vegetables going back. Like, we're literally talking about drying vegetables. This is pretty cool. Is anybody laughing yet? No? We're a little tired in the bed. There we go. A little chuckle. I like that. Back to drying vegetables. So what they found is they had some key elements they really needed to hit. Had to be easy, had to be easily graspable, had to really spin it fast. Anybody picking up where this is going? And what they found is that someone said, well, what's a really easy gesture for a kid to make? Let's do the lawnmower. And that's how the salad spinner was born. So they found that. They wanted to spin a basket. They knew they needed something that was easy and easy to work on both ends of the extremes, but literally they made something that served the entire spectrum. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because nobody will, but I bet everyone in here has a salad spinner or has given one at a wedding. Thank you. Thank you. And you and Ben and Val, thank you. My 4 people out there holding the flame. But it really is important, because that wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have gotten there. That innovation around what makes it easy to do and what solves those problems was really freaking cool. And now it's literally a product that's absolutely everywhere. So the last one is similar to prototyping. I think this just disconnected. Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, similar to prototyping. It's iteration. Iteration is where you've decided on a prototype. We have picked that we are going to do this one thing. We are going to pick this solution, this prototype that solves the problems, that hits the mark, that does what we want to do, and now you beat the crap out of it. You absolutely go through it, and you are giving it to multiple different teams, and you're saying, break it, build it, rebuild it, make it happen, figure out how it's going to work. And again, remember, we're time constrained. I've seen design sessions go through this entire process in 2 hours for products that are now on the shelves. Like, they can go fast. Again, that time constraint is really key. But as you're going through, 3 words, because I'm really big on takeaways. 3 words: desirability, feasibility, viability. Desirability. Do I want the thing? Is it something that I would want to have? Is it something that I would like to actually be in my kitchen, on my desk, whatever it might be? And feasibility. Is it something that feasibly could be mass produced, could be mass scaled? Is it something that feasibly actually just makes business sense? It's like the gut check. Does this make sense that we're doing this? And then the last one is viability. Viability is, can it go to market? And in viability stage, you can do things like, I like text storms, or a way to do viability checks. You can have a group of friends. You can say, hey, what do you guys think of this? And then they're going to say, that's terrible, that's great, that's good. I'm actually a really big fan of text messaging as a way to design, because you get that instant reaction. You get the gut feeling about it, because we've all been in those situations where we've felt something, or we've seen something, or we've done something that really the design didn't feel right. Does anybody ever hear about the ejection seats in World War II? That problem, the first human-centered design problem. Has anybody heard about that? Okay, so, yeah, I have one hand in the back. It was quiet, and I got you. Perfect. So here's what happened. They designed a plane that had an ejection pole right here. And they had a lot of ejection poles. Do you want to know what is also right here? The stick. So they were having a whole lot of ejection poles, and even worse, when people were really having problems, they would go to the wrong area because they weren't really thinking through and doing this whole process. What are we trying to do? We're trying to make something that is an easy way to get out of the plane. Solve those problems and think them through. And then if they had prototyped and iterated, they would have figured it out that it wasn't natural to try and reach here, that if something was going on, you needed something over here that was out of the way in a much more secure way. That was one of the first instances of the military getting into human-centered design. So the last one is the fail fast and fail forward as part of iterate. This is often the hardest one. In this process, everybody basically has to agree to check their egos at the door. It will only kill the process. And if you have people in that room that are killing the process, politely ask them to leave, schedule other meetings they have to go to. Like, you need to have this environment, and I know that this is like a trigger for some people, but a safe space, because you do. Everybody's got to be able to talk. Everybody's got to be able to get their ideas in, because that's one of the other things. One speaker at a time per team. If people are talking over, it just doesn't get done. Nothing happens. So then you have this fail fast, fail forward. The fail fast, fail forward is there are no bad designs. You're just learning every time it happens. That's what I tell my kids. There are bad designs. There are terribly bad designs. And if you get to this point and it is bad and it doesn't work, look, you just go right back up. You've already defined the problem. You've already ideated, and you probably have some prototypes you can go back to, and you just repeat the cycle. That's the beauty of this, is that this process is self-sustaining as you develop and build through these things. And then the last one is converge ideas. So this is where we're going the other direction. Now, instead of the big hand of all the ideas out, we want to go what we're all used to, which is the funnel in. So we want to come back here during the iteration phase. We want to look at the frame of the question and the problems. We want to look at the ideations, the prototypes, and we want to converge down and get to this last iteration stage. We want to get to, okay, now go test it in the market. Go get a focus group together. Go get something that's going out there. But that convergence is scary. It's really scary, because all of a sudden people have to let go of ideas. And when people get emotionally attached to ideas, one of two things happen. If they use those ideas, everybody loves them. Oh my God, oh my God, this is my idea. This is so great. I absolutely can't believe this is my idea. And then when they don't use your idea, it's terrible. And it's so bad, and it makes you feel bad. But the really cool part about this process is that when you converge, when you go through these ideation things, everybody gets a little piece of all the ideas that end up where you're going. So this is also a tool to effectively hack group work, where everybody contributes and everybody feels like they've got a little piece of the pie and a little bit of buy-in. And then close the process. And then that process is done, document it. Like I showed you guys the pictures, not Nicole, there. I showed you guys the pictures. I take pictures of all these boards. And then when you come back, you can come back and say, all right, well, we saw this, or we did this, or whatever. You move it around. It gets a lot better, because that documentation of the process then becomes your project brief. And then you don't have to write anything else. You just have pictures of all the boards where your stickies are. Some people get really complex, and I'm cool with it. Like, yellow is ideas, and blue is analysis, and red is to-dos, and there's all these different schemes you can find online. They're all great if they work. I'm a big fan of simple. I want it as simple as humanly possible so that we can get to what we need to do. All right, so before I move on, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to go into the personal stuff if anybody else wants to leave. Okay? All right, so are you guys ready? We're going to do this. So, ShowMeCon, not even a chuckle? Really? That's one of my best memes. Okay, I got one. All right, so some of you may or may not know me. My first talk at a conference was 4 years ago at ShowMeCon. Dave and Renee gave me my first shot to speak at a conference. Why did I want to speak at a conference? I wanted a better life. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I was miserable. I wasn't happy with what I was doing, but I also didn't see a way out. And so I created a plan. Literally developed a step-by-step plan that at least I can, in hindsight, say followed some of these same principles. But it was a whole plan around how to do this and what to do this. And so this part of the talk is, how do I tackle these personal issues? Because at the end of the day, the stuff that we're doing in work, the stuff we're doing at home, my adage is always, how you spend your day is how you spend your life. So if you're trying to develop better stuff at home and in your life, you're trying to develop better stuff at work, all of this stuff flows in and out of itself and works really well. And I will tell you, the more that I've gotten on board with like how I'm thinking in these processes, the better my work output and product has been. And I've gotten a whole lot better at working smart, even if I haven't gotten better at meme selection, apparently. Okay, so here was my problem. I'll just put myself out there for this. Struggling with mental illness, working with a wife who was also struggling with mental illness, had one kid, another one on the, no wait, September, yeah, no, we already had him. 6 months old, he was there, high-risk pregnancy. Unbelievable amounts of stress. I mean, I look back at that time in my life, and it's hard to even really comprehend how I didn't just fall apart. But what I did is I said, what's my problem? What's the specific problem? I have a lot of problems, but what's the specific problem that I want to solve? I wanted to be able to come to conferences like this. I wanted to be able to write. I think the buzzword is thought leader, which is just, but what I really wanted to do was help. I wanted to help people learn. I wanted to come out and teach. Like, has anybody ever seen one of my other talks on HIPAA? I had Wrath of the Audits. That was one, hey, hi. It's one of my favorites, Wrath of the Audits. I did D&D HIPAA. That one was a lot of fun. Some privacy stuff. We did a panel a couple years ago. But my whole idea is that what I wanted to do was take complex things and make them simple for people and then have them pay me to do that. So I've done the first two steps of that. I'm working on that third one. Although I did give a talk at Capital One Mortgage something, which was definitely one of the weirdest. I mean, it was just, I have no idea how they found my name, but they paid me $500 to come talk to them about privacy. Do you know how many people showed up? It was amazing. 3. Oh my God, it was incredible. Like, it was such a wake-up call. The 5,000 person conference, 3 people in the room. Like, we just sat at the table and talked about privacy. It was really intimate. But my whole idea was, how do I actually do something that works? Because, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. I think about like the problems I'm facing even now. I just left my last job, just moved out to California. I still have both kids and my wife, thankfully. My geriatric dog is still hanging on, and I don't know what I'm gonna do tomorrow. But it's so overwhelming because we're just taught that when it's overwhelming, if we just hide from it, compartmentalize it, and cope it out, that's why this was funny. This one, that's why it's funny. You're all gonna laugh at that by the end, I promise. But that's the whole thing. We're taught to actually avoid that shit. We don't wanna do it. It's big and overwhelming, it's a problem. Okay, so here I was. I had the education, I had friends like Dave, and I had the will. So I created a plan. I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to talk at a big honkin' conference. I wanted people to get value out of what that was. So I put a goal 18 months out from that. And then I said, how do I get there? And all I did was I just looked. I just figured out, I don't have the credibility because I haven't written. I don't have the credibility because I haven't given talks. I don't have the credibility because I haven't written a book. So let's start. And so I set a goal. I was going to write 2 articles every 2 weeks, and then I was just going to start trying to find people to publish them. And nobody did. Really fast, nobody did. It was great. So I got my own website, and I started posting my own blogs there, and then I started getting all sorts of Russian bots linking to it, and then I started to get people that wanted to talk, and they wanted to hear from me. Tripwire, I was a contributing author on Tripwire, State of Security for a long time, until they realized that I don't know anything about security. And I still don't get that one, but they gave me my first shot. It was great, and I love them, and I give all the love I can to them. But truly, I just started. But I had a plan. It was literally written out, you guys. Like, I'm going to do this, and I set goals, and I had a visual calendar. This is what I wanted. So then I said, all right, I need to get extreme. Have you ever heard of the acronym BHAG? I hate it. I hate how it sounds, but I love what it means. Big, hairy, audacious goal. Okay? That's my extremes. I wanted to get out there. I wanted to get out there on a big stage, right? So I set those goals, and then I backed into it. And this is how I do all of my problem solving now in my professional careers. I say, okay, what's our problem? look, I'm defining the problem. And then I say, okay, well, now that I have the problem, I need to figure out solutions. And I start to iterate through the solutions. And then I create a plan. And I can't tell you how much this approach has changed my life, because what it's really done is it's given me the confidence to know that I can follow through on the plans. Because it doesn't have to be big. That's the thing. These plans, these things that you're going to do, don't do big things, do small things. Do a series of small things. Do nested development. Like where is that? Oh, there we go. We've all done that. Do nested development. So I broke it down that I had to write, I had to research conferences, and I had to learn how to write a CFP. Thank you, Ben, for helping me write my first CFP. And then I got a system in place, and I did it, and I dedicated it. I put it on my calendar. I counted that I was going to spend this amount of time every single week on writing, and it wasn't much, and I was so bad at the beginning. And then I got better, and I got better, and I was able to write more, and I was able to do more, and I got editing, because here's the thing. It takes 21 days to make a habit. That's it. If you can force yourself to do something for 21 days, when your brain says, hey, why aren't you doing that thing? It'll go, no, go do it. You feel weird. You have to do this or you're going to feel weird. And you can do that with anything in your life. It's unbelievable. When you walk out of the house without shoes on, why does that feel weird? Because it's a habit. All those things, you can program your brain like a computer. And there's research and literature, and I can show you guys or share it, whatever you guys want. You can literally program your brain like a computer. Habits. Habits. 7 days to break, 21 days to make. So I broke the habits of not writing and started writing every single day for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I probably spent more time on the toilet than I was writing at that time. But every day for 20 minutes turned into 30, turned into an hour. And now my writing skills, even like conceptually, I'm a professional writer. I've been published. I'm also a lawyer. I was a terrible writer when it came to like things that were compelling, because I wasn't practiced at it. It wasn't something I developed a habit at. So I got in the habit of it. And I made small projects. So there I was writing. I got my first talk at ShowMeCon, and then the ball started to roll downhill almost so fast it was scary. I did ShowMeCon, then I did B-Sides, and then I did a slew of other conferences. And the whole thing that came down here was every time that like one of those things would happen, I'd come back to, wherever I had written it down, and I would say, okay, what worked, what didn't? Iterate, revise, revisit, every single time. But I can't stress enough, step 3, you gotta write it out. Again, research and science underpins everything that I'm telling you today. There is a power to writing something down. When you write something on paper, it becomes something your brain has to scratch. It doesn't work the same with this or this. So when you write it down, your odds of completing that goal go up by 80%. I think it's higher, but the best my brain can remember is 80%. I think it's actually like 87, but 80% chance of completing the goal you write down. Micro goals, structure it like a computer program, nested stuff. Big, 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 little, tiny, 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 and it adds up. Because it keeps coming back and back and back and back and back, and then you do it over and over and over again. So iterate, revise, revisit, and keep updating it. If you're not doing that part, the document's dead. Like, you should be seeing it. You should be looking at it. You should be feeling it. So here's how I did those things. I talked it out. I've talked to actually several of you in this room about what my goals were and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to get there. And I was, a lot of them were not very good because I was brainstorming and getting extreme. Streaking across the stage at a large conference was a hard pass. Lots of ideas I thought would have gotten traction, but it didn't. But I talked about it because here's the other thing. Writing it out increases your odds of completing the goal by 80%. Talking about it is an exponential impact on your ability to do it. Collective decision-making that's really just solo support is one of the most powerful things that you can learn to do. Because if you talk to people about it, you build consensus around it, a couple things happen. First, they're going to have really good ideas. It takes a village to do all of this crap. I have not had any talk or anything that I've developed in a silo. All of my biggest projects, biggest successes were built with other people. Because you're really, really good at one thing, and that's being you. And Everybody else is really, really good at being themselves, but together, their lessons and your lessons start to converge. See, I'm tying it all back. I'm hooking it into something that's really cool. So the other one is the micro, mezzo, and macro. This is my new favorite trio of words that I'm trying to figure out ways to work into talks. And I think the way that I'm going to work it into this talk is that focus on the small, the medium, and the large. Short-term, medium range, long range. And what I find is that I set not just goals, but like metrics. I just treat it like, okay, I have to hit these metrics in order to accomplish what I want to do. And then reward yourself. Like, literally, predefined rewards. Like, my wife and I have a board when we hit all of our goals for a week. I know this sounds really ridiculous, and it doesn't work all the time, but it does work sometimes. And like, at the end of the week, if we hit all the goals, like, you get $50. I mean, like, I'm not kidding. Like, it works. Like, pay yourself to do yourself. Seriously. Because when you do this stuff and you add in things like how you're going to save money and whatever stuff, this stuff will pay for itself even when you're paying yourself. Like, you don't even, like, it's hard to even express, but it really is there. And if you need someone to hold you accountable, I will text the shit out of you. Like, I will set up a service. I will talk to you. We've got forum boards. We've got emails, smoke signals. We can send Dan Yarger out to your house. Like, he's just... Does everybody know Dan? Is Dan still in the room? No, Dan left. Dan Sexy Yarger. I forgot to put the picture of him on the pool table. I'll find it. Don't worry. Hold yourself accountable. That's really the thing. The visual plan. I don't know why, but the visual plan works for me. Science shows it works. So I've got a huge-ass whiteboard. All of my projects, I break things out in the micro, mezzo, macro. So I've got, now, which means I'm already a few days behind. I've got next, which is the next week or so. And then I've got, bigger ones, which are a month out. Those visual plans of how you're doing it don't have to be sophisticated. Mine's literally just a whiteboard with some magnets and some words that I put next to it. But again, by putting it up there and doing it, you start to actually do the stuff. There's a power behind it. And the last one, the macro, is really keeping track of big progress. Reward yourself. Like, talk about it. This is a lesson that I learned the hard way. If you don't talk about yourself, nobody else will. If you don't promote yourself, no one else will. I mean, your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your mom, your grandmother, they will promote you. But they won't promote you at work. They won't promote you personally, professionally. I was always really bad at this. I know it's hard to imagine because I love talking. I clearly love the sound of my own voice right now. But I was terrible at it. I still am terrible at Twitter. I don't understand. But like, I get it. But I'm not good at talking about myself. And so I made a promise to myself. I had a really big, I hit my macro goal in March. I gave 2 talks at South by Southwest, which was one of the proudest things I've ever done. I put on 2 talks. Both were part of a series called Mental Health Rebellion. And the first talk, and this is just how weird things are. So they asked me to put on this talk on International Women's Day. There should be a lot more chuckling at that. No, we're good. They asked me to put on a talk on International Women's Day and then wanted me to moderate it, and they wanted to put me on the invitation, and I just don't think you guys get this, but we went with it. I faded into the background, gave a voice to some amazing people that were doing this. And then the next one was Mental Health Rebellion 101, and we brought experts from all over the country to come in and talk about these humongous system-wide frameworks about how to do this. And I had never really talked much about myself. That's not true, like promoting myself social media-wise and whatnot. The group that put that talk on was the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And they asked me to come to General Assembly in September to put on a series of talks about mental health. And that then became the thing I'm most proud of. But it all built and rolled on itself. Everything was underpinned from that very first decision to start writing. Small goal. And it built. And that's why, like, when Dave said, can you come give this talk? Like, I'm a little emotional right now, I'll be honest. Like, that's why this was so important to me, because this was my 4-year cycle. I set an 18-month goal to start to talk at big conferences. At month 18 to 24, I spoke at HIMSS. I gave a talk in front of thousands of people at SAP Sapphire 2 years ago. Like one of those things where the stage was like 4 stories tall. I was so pukey. Oh my God. I don't even think my head came up to the bottom of the screen. It was so big, and it was just terrible. But the technology failed. Every speaker screen there died, and I had to do it all from memory. Yeah. And I killed it, because everything that I was talking about was all the shit that I had written. Everything that I'd built up to was all nesting in on itself. So once I got up there and I got in the flow, I blacked out and then woke up and I had done a good job. Like, I just didn't even have to think about it. It just came out of me. It's like, I think this is one of the first talks where I feel like I've been present. Whenever I give talks, I have like this dissociative event where I'm not really there. This one's a lot more from the heart. So I'm actually like, I'm here with you guys, which is really fun. But I did. And like, it was unbelievable. That dovetailed or pushed or rolled into a innovation award-winning project on data anonymization and mental health crisis data for an entire region. I'm really big on other people paying for things. And I got SAP to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into proving that mental health needed to have an anonymization model, that it had the ability to do it, and that there was a business model for it. And at one point, we had like 25 people from Germany talking about data science and security and all this stuff. And I was like, holy shit, like, this all came from that very first decision. I want to write on it, I want to build it, I want to do it. And then I wanted to roll it into something I was passionate for. So this is really kind of like how I approach things. This is like the human-centered design aspect of what I wanted, because I wanted to define my problem. I think a lot of times that's such a hard question to ask. It's such a hard thing, like, what's my problem? I have a lot of problems. I have a lot of things I'd like to tackle. Don't do that. Pick small things. Pick one thing. Pick 2 things. Pick them little. And then just tackle that one thing. Because here's the thing. If you do this for 21 days, it becomes a habit. And then you start to get better at problem solving. You start to get better at figuring shit out. And then instead of doing these big peaks and valleys and shit's all up and down, your band gets a little narrower and a little narrower, and you start to regulate and modulate. And for someone with mental illness, this really helps me, because it helps me understand the intrusive thoughts, helps me understand what's not real, what's just, depression talking or anxiety talking. I can't tell you how many times I've sat after a talk just like this and had to go to my room and mind raced over, oh my God, it was so terrible. Ben left halfway through. Dan didn't even stay past the first minute or 2. Like, that's my brain. I have to churn off all those thoughts, all those burns, all those things. But once I created the plans, once I stuck with the plans, it really got to a place where I could start to trust myself. And that's the real key behind this whole thing. That's the whole key behind talking it out with people, developing these different metrics, having a visual plan, is that you create something that is almost meta of you. Whether you're doing it in work or you're doing it personally, that meta-ness of what you're trying to accomplish becomes something that you can trust in and rely in when shit gets hard. Because what we've been told our whole lives is that we are whole and everything in us is real, and we have to listen to our feelings or bottle them up or, whatever, one of those things. It's not true. Like, there are thoughts in everyone's brains that are intrusive, that are wrong. They're not even real. They're not even like your consciousness doing it. It's depression, it's anxiety, it's whatever. But they're called intrusive thoughts. Has anybody ever heard of intrusive thoughts? Yeah. Read them. Read up about them if you haven't. It's amazing. It will help you feel so much better to understand the concept of intrusive thoughts, because they're not real. So the whole idea behind this was I wanted to make this plan. I wanted to build this for myself, because it's not too far of an exaggeration to say it saved my life. The projects I'm working on now, the things I'm doing, the people I'm talking to, I can't even understand that that's actually me. It doesn't feel like it's me. It doesn't even feel like that's who I am or what I'm doing, because in the middle of the night, I still have the anxiety gerbils just like spinning on that wheel. But it gets better because you start to trust in yourself. You start to trust in that plan and that development. And then wake up, kick ass, and repeat. And then you have bad days. You're going to have good days. Like, I have one more concept to pass on before I stop. Has anybody ever heard of the sinner and saint dichotomy? Oh, cool. We get some education. Okay. Who's ever been a smoker? Okay. Good. Who's ever tried to quit smoking? Okay. Good. Who's ever drank alcohol? Okay. Well, that's a lot more hands. Okay. Who's ever tried to stop drinking alcohol? Yeah, a few less. Who's ever been on a diet? There's one. We can all get on board. Okay. And who cheated on their diet? Everybody raise their hands. There we go. The sinner and saint dichotomy is this concept in psychology that when you cheat, your brain's like, fuck it, I'm taking my clothes off, let's do it. As opposed to being like, I am non-linear human being, I'm going to mess up, and that's okay. I don't have to take my clothes off and run through the conference. It will be fine. Seriously, it's the sinner and saint methodology. And like we teach ourselves like, well, I smoked once today, fuck it, I'm just gonna smoke for the rest of the day. Or I did 12 shots of tequila, I'm gonna go to the craps table. Like, all these things our brain does, they're not real, they're intrusive thoughts. They're real because they're thoughts, but they're not really like what you're trying to do. So keep that in mind, like, be gentle with yourselves. These things are gonna go bad, they're gonna go good. I'm always here, my contact is on the next page. Email me, it's my personal email, you can reach out, and I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about it. Don't let the sinner and saint dichotomy fuck you up, because it will. It's really hard, because then, who was raised Christian? Who's a recovering Catholic? Anybody? Who's an existing Catholic but contemplating recovering Catholic? Lots of people. Jewish, Hindu, Muslim. The guilt that we program into our brains for the sinner and saint dichotomy permeates every aspect of our lives. I didn't do this, I start to feel bad, I should have done this, and your performance just goes, and that's the sinner and saint dichotomy. The truth is that we're never perfect, we're all non-linear human beings. It's always up and down and side to side and around. There's no straight path, no matter what Instagram or Facebook tells you, nobody's having that much fun and doing that good, ever. Because it's nonlinear. We're all nonlinear. So be gentle with yourselves. My name is Hudson Harris, and I'm more than happy to stay and talk if anybody wants to email me or tweet at me. I think I'm also on Marco Polo, which I don't really understand yet either. I don't know why I would video text message somebody. It doesn't make sense. I don't want to see them. That's why I'm texting them. But nonetheless, I'm available anytime to talk. And go out there and kick some ass, guys. Did anybody have any questions? Nope, we covered it. Oh, yes, hi. Thank you for coming again.
I enjoyed the first time.
Yay.
You talked a couple times about consensus. And I'm just wondering, do you ever find that your project or whatever gets kind of paralyzed with
Yep.
a bunch of people in a room who just can't agree? And you can't
Yeah. Yes, so consensus. Here's how I get consensus, because the question was, do you ever find your projects get paralyzed with consensus? Absolutely. I fucking hate group projects. I do all the work and everybody else gets all the credit and it's bullshit. However, here's what I found. Blind ranking is the only way to go. On this slide, right here. So here's an example of how to do this. So what I encourage all of my clients and everybody I work with to do on this is called blind ranking. Everybody gets a note card, you write the number of ideas or whatever it is, and then everybody blind ranks it, and then one person takes them and compiles them, and whatever your statistical model or you add them up or however you do it is, the top 3 go. And that's part of setting constraints. That's part of how to get that constraint model in, because then you don't get personal investment or personal loss when someone's idea isn't picked, and somebody voted for, odds are, the idea that was picked. So that's one of the ways I've addressed kind of the consensus problem is blind voting. They even have apps now where you can blind vote on your app and it'll score it for a mod in the room. In the room, yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you everybody.